The Defenders, the latest Marvel Netflix series in the series of Netflix shows that they've been putting out. They put out Daredevil and Jessica Jones, and Luke Cage and Iron Fist, and now we have The Defenders, which is a culmination of all these shows all together. And this show stars Charlie Cox, Kristen Ritter, Mike Colter, Finn Jones, and this show is basically, like I said, the culmination of each of the shows that we've gotten so far. And it's basically how they have to fight against this organization called The Hand, which was in Daredevil Season 2, as well as Iron Fist, and they are an enemy that we've seen in the Marvel Netflix so far. They're like an organization that want to do terrible stuff to New York. The works of this organization, The Hand, ends up affecting each of the members of the Defenders, which are the 4 people in the shows that I mentioned earlier, and they end up having to work together to stop this Hand from doing terrible stuff to New York. So guys, I was really excited for Marvel's Defenders. When I saw the trailer, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait for this, because Marvel Netflix has put out some of the best stuff of all Marvel. Not just the MCU, because it is part of the MCU, if you didn't know that. Daredevil Season 1 was fantastic. Jessica Jones was just as good, if not maybe a little bit better. I love both those shows. And then we had Daredevil Season 2, which was also fantastic, and Luke Cage, which I thought was great. Some people didn't really like Luke Cage. I thought that was great, just like the other shows. And then there's Iron Fist, which I never saw, because so many people were telling me it was horrible, and I was gonna watch it, and I was gonna review it, but I never ended up doing it for some reason. I was very unmotivated to watch that show, because everyone had said it's horrible, so I went straight into The Defenders without seeing Iron Fist, which you don't really need to see Iron Fist in order to understand what's going on in The Defenders. So since I loved everything that Marvel Netflix has been putting out so far, I was super excited to see what they would do if they combined all these characters together into one show, and this show is really good. Defenders is once again another great show from Marvel Netflix. Not without its problems though, but it is another really welcome addition to the Marvel Netflix stuff. I think if you are a fan of the MCU movies and what they've been doing with the films, you should also check out their shows, because I don't usually review TV shows on my channel. This is like the first time I've done it in a long time. I usually rarely review TV shows, but the Marvel Netflix stuff is so good, and I feel like I should shout this stuff out to people who haven't seen it. People who don't watch TV that often, I implore you to watch the Marvel Netflix stuff, because they are really welcome additions to the MCU, and for me, they're some of the best stuff Marvel has ever done. I think if you miss out on this, you're missing out on some of the best stuff the MCU has to offer. Right off the bat, let me mention the obvious. This is basically the Avengers of the Marvel Netflix series. The 4 superheroes that we've been following in the other shows combine in this show, and all 4 of them are really cool to see interacting, especially Daredevil, Jessica Jones, and Luke Cage. I love these characters. Charlie Cox, once again, is fantastic as Daredevil. He's made Daredevil one of my favorite superheroes of all time. I love the character of Daredevil, especially because of how well Charlie Cox played him in the other seasons and in this. He has another really good arc in this season. He wants to retire as Daredevil. He wants to stop being Daredevil because it's involving so much with his personal life. It's really pushing away the people he loves. He has to spend so much time being Daredevil rather than being Matt Murdock, the lawyer. So he wants to stop being Daredevil so he can concentrate on his normal life, which is really understandable. It reminded me of Spider-Man 2, which is where, like, Peter Parker, his 2 lives are colliding, and it's causing him so much stress that he just wants to be Peter Parker. He doesn't want to be Spider-Man anymore.
Raindrops keep falling on my head, and just like the guy whose feet are too big for his bed, nothing seems to fit.
And Jessica Jones, once again, the alcoholic who hates people and hates everything and is always so negative and sassy. She is so good in this show once again. She really wants to solve this case. She doesn't really care about people, so they had a good motivation, and they made her very reluctant to go on all the adventures that the Defenders do in this movie, which is really wise, because Jessica Jones always hates everything, so it's in her character to her to not want to do any of this, but the other characters sort of force her to do it, and she's like, whatever. It was a really wise decision to do with her character, and Jessica Jones in this season was once again fantastic, and Luke Cage, again, is so great. And Iron Fist, who I didn't even see in Iron Fist like I mentioned. This is my first time seeing Iron Fist in a show. He's actually pretty good in this show. I know a lot of people didn't like him in the original Iron Fist. I thought he was pretty good in this show. While he's alone doing his own thing in the first few episodes, because the first few episodes is like is like cutting between a bunch of different shows, sort of. It's like cutting between Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist. While he's doing that, it was by far the least interesting of those four culminating things. But still, when he interacts with Defenders, he's at his best. He's definitely the least of the four Defenders, though. But when he's interacting with the Defenders and he has good material to work with, I found Iron Fist pretty likable. Even though he's not as good as the other three for me, I really liked seeing the other three interact more than him. But when they gave Iron Fist good material to work with, I liked him. I thought it was pretty good. And like I said earlier, the first few episodes are a bunch of culminating shows. The first few episodes, they don't even meet each other for a little bit, and they're sort of like cutting between the different like things involving the different Defenders. They're not together until like I think episode 2 or 3 or something. I forget. But in the first few episodes, they cut between these different shows, and I thought they handled that really well. I felt like I was watching 4 different shows at once, which could easily end up being messy, but it really worked for me. And the first 3 episodes have some really good build-up, and I was surprised by how not messy it felt to have these 4 different shows intertwined. Definitely when the Defenders finally meet each other, it's really well done. Their banter is fantastic. Another thing they did with the Defenders that is really wise is that they actually made them feel like they kind of hated each other at first, and they were slowly getting used to each other, because as the show goes on, they start to like each other even more as they're going through a bunch of perilous situations, but at first, they really hate each other, which kind of makes sense because these 4 people are very damaged people. Daredevil has been through a lot of hardships in his life. Jessica Jones is an alcoholic who hates everything. Luke Cage lost his wife and he was in prison for a long time. They have been through tons of hardships, and they're very cynical people, so it really made sense to have them all hate each other at first and then slowly get used to each other. This show is 8 episodes. It's a little bit shorter than the 13 episodes we had in the other seasons, but definitely, if they had anything less than 8 episodes, I feel like that would have been a problem, because they needed a lot of time to have these people get used to each other and interact with each other. There's a lot of really good humor involving these characters, because Daredevil's like the only one with an actual suit, and he's the only one really trying to contain his identity, so there's a lot of humor that comes with that, especially Jessica Jones always insulting him for his suit and the stuff he wears. There's a lot of really good humor that comes with the Defenders interacting with each other, and it's really well done. The action in this season is also fantastic. There's a lot of really memorable action scenes that I really loved. They're not all great, because there are a few action scenes that are very underexposed. You can't really see what's happening in the action scenes because they're so dark, but for the most part, a lot of the action scenes are really great. Especially the action scene towards the last finale thing. The action scenes there are probably the best of the whole season. There's tons of like panning shots of all the Defenders working together and fighting, and it was glorious. Seeing these characters interact with each other was the coolest thing ever. The show is once again, like the other Marvel Netflix stuff, a lot more dark. It's a lot more gritty. It doesn't hold back with the violence. This show is way more surfaced on the crime, because you got the Avengers and the other stuff in the movies where they're just trying to save the world from mass destruction, but in these movies they're more based on smaller crime things, and they really don't hold back with how dark crime can be. Crime can be a very disgusting thing. It can get very violent, it can be very dark, and it can be very emotional, and they really sold that in this show. But like I said earlier, this season is not flawless. There are some problems here and there. I mentioned how Iron Fist in the first few episodes is by far the least interesting, and also there are a lot of underexposed action scenes where it's too dark, but there are some other flaws too. Sigourney Weaver's character, I love Sigourney Weaver a lot. She's one of my favorite actresses, and she is really good in this show. She's really intriguing, she's really intimidating, she's very subdued, and she has a vulnerability to her. I'm not going to spoil anything about her character if you haven't seen the show, but she's really vulnerable, she's really mysterious. But the thing I didn't like about her character is that they didn't really dive into her as much as I thought they were going to. I thought towards the end of the season they were going to have a lot more with her where she can really stand out, but she doesn't really have a standout scene. They built her up to be this mysterious character, and then usually when they have a mysterious villain, they start to go full forward with them later in the show, and they start to have a lot of really standout moments where they're really scary and they're really cool. Imagine if you're watching Avatar: The Last Airbender, my favorite show of all time, where they're building up Fire Lord Ozai, and they're building him up up to be this mysterious character that they do in the first 2 seasons. Imagine if he just wasn't in season 3 at all. Imagine if season 3, where he finally gets fleshed out a lot, imagine if that just never happened. And imagine if you're just left with this intriguing, mysterious character, but the character never gets to stand out. He never gets to do anything great, he never gets to be fleshed out. That's what I felt like with Sigourney Weaver in this show. She felt like a character that was really well built up. She was very mysterious, but they never got to have her shine in this show. She never got to have like a standout moment where she got to do some crazy, scary things. They never really fleshed her out, which is something which was really upsetting, because I felt like she was going to be another fantastic addition to the Marvel Netflix villains like Kingpin and Kilgrave. But while she's there, she's interesting, but it's just like, I wanted more. I wanted more to her. And there are a few story elements here and there that are a little bit rushed, and I wanted them to be delved in a little bit more. So those are my problems with the Defenders. It's really hard to actually like explain the problems really far without spoiling anything, without spoiling stuff that happens in the show, but they are problems. The show is not perfect. I still think probably Luke Cage, Daredevil, and Jessica Jones are probably better, but this is another fantastic addition to the Marvel Netflix things. And one of my favorite things about Marvel Netflix is that they actually took time to set up these characters and make the setups to these characters as good as they can be. Because even though I like the MCU, they put out some really quality content. They did have some movies that were leading up to the Avengers that were just kind of like, okay, you could have just skipped that. Like, Thor was not that good, and Captain America was a good movie, but it was just like, it wasn't anything amazing. Everything leading up to the Defenders has been great so far, besides Iron Fist, which I haven't seen. Everything leading up, they took their time to make everything incredible, which is something I really respect about the Marvel Netflix stuff. I'm gonna give the Defenders an A-. Another really welcome addition to the MCU, and I really can't wait to see where they take the Marvel Netflix stuff, and the MCU in general. So guys, if you like my review of the Defenders, be sure to like this video, be sure to subscribe, be sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and I will see y'all next time. Bye-bye! Go ahead.
Ready?
Go. Yes.
Hi, this is Jessica Hennig from Iron Fist and Game of Thrones, and I'm telling you to go subscribe to
Stupid Beagle Reviews.
Thank you.
No, that's terrible.